The Wokes are at it again with their pronouns, but this time they've struck horse games. Hello friends, my name is Abigail Pinehaven and I'm a horse game YouTuber as well as a horse game consultant. Very niche, I know, but that makes me somewhat qualified to talk about this tweet which blew up. So who is Alice? What is Windstorm? And why did this seemingly basic tweet absolutely blew up and has people raging? Alice Rupert, well known in the horse gaming community as the creator behind the Main Quest blog. She's been around for years, writing articles on horse games and games with horses. She is also a game consultant, and while I'm not sure of the extent of her work, I do know that she was community lead on Wildshade, which is a fantasy horse racing game, and a creative producer on Horsetail's Emerald Valley Ranch. She's currently working as a creative producer and consultant on a brand new horse game, Windstorm: The Legend of Khiimori. This is where our story begins. The Legend of Khiimori is actually a nice break from the typical save your family's ranch by competing trope that gets shoved down horse gamers' throat all the time. Instead, this game is set in 13th century Mongolia, where you play as a courier rider, where you tame, train, and breed horses that you will then use to traverse throughout the world. Legend of Khiimori is not currently available to play, as its release is scheduled for sometime in Q1 of 2025. As most games do, however, marketing starts before the release of the game, and thus this tweet was born. It reads, "We're making a game where you play a courier rider in 13th century Mongolia. No combat, just you, the horses you've tamed, bred and trained, and the vast wilderness. Would you play this?" And it got 15.5 million views in like just over a week. So why? Well, partly this is one of the first ever horse games to actually figure out that, hey, if we make a horse game that appeals to a wider audience rather than just horse girls, then we'll, well, appeal to a wider audience. It has an interesting concept. You're not just brushing a horse and pressing space to jump. You seemingly have a bigger role to play in an interesting world and timeline. So yeah, the tweet was able to reach a much bigger audience because it wasn't all sparkles and rainbows. But that's not all. Another reason the tweet went viral was because of a curious Twitter account called Doodle Whale. They replied saying, "I would love to, as long as it can avoid woke DEI nonsense which appears unlikely as you have pronouns in your bio." For those who don't know, DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So yeah, we're off to a great start. If you're unaware, pronouns are how we refer to people and things. She went to the market. It fell off the table. They had a tantrum. In more recent history, it's become common to put your pronouns in your bio so that people will know how to refer to you in the third person. Alice replies to that tweet with an absolutely killer line. "For every comment like this, I will add an extra pronoun into the game." It doesn't matter what you think about Alice, this is the coldest snapback you could have hoped for. So let's jump into how bigotry skyrocketed a horse game into the wider internet space. That is not a sentence I thought I was going to be saying this year. So, did they just wokeify a game set in 13th century Mongolia, before pronouns, when men could be men and people died of dysentery? As a YouTuber named Rev Says Desu said,
So today we're going to be looking at another example of a game crippling its own success by appealing to the modern audience.
Ah yes, a modern audience. Progressive, tolerant, inclusive. Oh, the horror.
Now today we're going to be looking at a game called Windstorm: The Legend of Khiimori, who decided it'd be a good idea to add extra pronouns into their game.
Is Legend of Khiimori really adding pronouns? No. I mean, come on. She's really going to add a pronoun for every comment she receives? People like this are why there's instructions on shampoo bottles. From what I can tell, you play as a female protagonist, and I can assume this based on the Steam tags, as well as in the trailer you play as a female avatar, and there's a feminine actor in the voiceover. Nowhere on the original tweet, promos, dev talks, or trailer were pronouns ever mentioned. However, Alice does have pronouns in her bio, which is where Doodle Whale made the connection that Legend of Khiimori was going to be woke. Wow, we are just missing multiple steps in a thought process and just running with it. And of course, taking Alice's clapback as genuine fact. You know, because this isn't taking the mick out of people who get immediately triggered at the thought of pronouns. This is where there was a divide. On one side, you had the anti-woke jumping to the conclusion that this game was going to ruin history in favor of appealing to a modern audience, and the other side of people clearly supporting the game just to spite those afraid of woke horses. And all this is brilliant for The Legend of Khiimori. It means that there is a conversation, a heated one at that is so widespread they couldn't have even hoped to have done this artificially. It doesn't matter if 90% of people who saw this tweet decided that they hated the game and that they weren't going to buy it, because 10% of 15.5 million is still 1.5 million. That's 1.5 million eyes on a product that they wouldn't have even known about had it not been for this tweet. So yes, keep arguing, keep sharing it in your hate circles, keep raging and creating YouTube content on it, because it's bringing more eyes onto the tweet and the game. Congrats Alice, and congratulations to The Legend of Khiimori for this fabulous exposure. So let's start a conversation of our own. Now that we know that Alice's tweet was taken at face value and used to trigger people who are afraid of blue hair, let's talk about if Legend of Khiimori actually did add pronouns to the game. Would this be destroying the integrity of Mongolian history? The long and the short of it is no. Having a character that you can select the pronouns for would literally have zero effect on the game. Because what does it actually change? Maybe the body build of the character. Maybe how NPCs refer to the player. But that would only be if the developers actually put in the code for all this. It more than likely would just be a label that only you could see. Yes, but in 13th century Mongolia, they didn't have pronouns. They didn't have pronouns? Again, this literally has no effect on the story that's told in the game or the way that the history is presented. What it does have an effect on is how angry anti-woke people are. Does it offend you so greatly that there's an extra option to choose for people who are not you? So no, Legend of Khiimori is not what the right-wing fear-mongering implied it would be. But I want to take a moment to be balanced and bring up some things that I think could be problematic in the game. And I'll admit, I'm part of the problem. When the trailer was first released, I was mortified that the horses looked like this. They are short, stocky, have stumpy necks, and look closer to a Przewalski than the modern day dressage horse. Honestly, they are a bit ugly. As someone who is a horse girl through and through, I have a distinct love for Arabians, thoroughbreds, Friesians, and even Clydesdales. I am also, like many horse people, drawn to pretty horses. And as I have just stated, these are not pretty horses. So I turned my nose up at it. I did leave a comment on the trailer. I can't find it now, but I definitely did make one. And I think other people shared this sentiment too. I'll admit, this came from a place of ignorance, as I didn't actually know what Mongol horses look like, so I had assumed that this was yet another botched anatomy of horses. If you're in the horse gaming world, you'll know that this is very commonplace. There has been a rise in quick cash grab games with little to no quality control. But after speaking to fellow content creator Rattle and doing my own research, I quickly learned that this is a very accurate representation of the breed, and I came to appreciate the fact that they were being as true to life as they could be, and that my own bias had blinded me on that. However, 3 weeks ago, a dev talk video was released, and this time they were showing the same stocky Mongol horses and what looked like a taller, more slender breed of horse. In these screenshots, you can see that this horse is a Mongol mix, and the horse right after is just a straight up warm blood. A quick Google search confirms that Mongolia did not have warm blood horses in the 13th century, making this a historical inaccuracy. Is this the end of the world? Do we boycott Legend of Khiimori? No, of course not. But I do think it opens an interesting conversation talking about how heavily we judge games based on visuals, and how this could be perceived as westernizing an element of a game to appeal to a wider audience. As I said, no offense to Mongolian horses, they're strong, sturdy, fearless, tough, but they're also built like bulldogs. They aren't particularly elegant or statuesque like warm bloods are, meaning they don't have as much appeal to horse gamers, and as we know, that's going to be an intended part of the audience. Mongolian horses are, as Rattle pointed out to me, the pride and joy of Mongolian people. By giving players a prettier alternative to an incredibly important aspect of this culture, are you saying that it's okay to opt out of learning how to step away from our westernized standards and put ourselves in someone else's shoes? Interesting concept. Another gripe I saw people have about the game was the fact that it didn't have any combat, and I saw some fair talking points about how cozy games are all the rage right now, but it does seem a little bit strange to have a perfect opportunity to incorporate mounted combat, which is a huge element of Mongolian culture, and opt to just run through the world unopposed. I'm not saying that this makes the game bad, but I would like to see more horse games have the courage to implement combat systems, since it is such a valuable feature in so many other games. It doesn't need to be super realistic or gory. I mean, Minecraft has combat and that's age rated for 10+. But I do get it. If you're wanting to create more of a chill vibe and to also be inclusive of younger audiences, I just hope that it doesn't fall prey to monotony and tedium. So that's pretty much all I had to say on the whole debacle. I am really looking forward to the release of Legend of Khiimori, and if you enjoyed this video, considering subscribing and giving the video a like. So I hope you guys enjoyed, stay positive, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!